Hello, good evening. Welcome to this edition of the program. Thank you very much for your time. Tonight we have two big issues to share with you, and we have a big announcement about what we'll be doing in our program on Tuesday. South Africa became the story that replaced the trend of our special prosecutor vetting story since Tuesday. Jacob Zuma, the South African president, in a very dramatic manner last night, resigned as president, and he will be replaced after some processes by Cyril Ramaphosa. It puts South Africa into a completely different perspective. Why did Jacob Zuma resign, and why does the South African political system allow Jacob Zuma to resign? On Tuesday, we'll be comparing political systems in the studio. We'll talk about that and give you some more details about that because it promises to be interesting. What we're doing tonight, though, is that, yes, everyone knows that Jacob Zuma is gone. On the first part of our program, we'll take a detailed look at it. In the second part of our program, the special prosecutor during his vetting, or shall I say special prosecutor to be, the Martin Benz-Kaiser, which has become the popular middle name, Martin Benz-Kaiser Hamidou, said something about the way in which investigative journalists must conduct their trial in order not to do media trial. Of course, it sends us back to the controversial editorial that we put out. And we'll show you what Martin Hamidou said in relation to the editorial that we put out. Today we are pulling no punches, but of course on this program we take no prisoners, and we always have a no-holds-barred discussion. So yes, we are going back to that matter and putting into perspective what the special prosecutor to be said to Parliament to help all of us journalists in the way in which we conduct our affairs. First, though, we start with Jacob Zuma, and we are taking you back historically. In 2015, when there was xenophobic violence in South Africa, we put up a short video, a short studio narration, I should say, which talked about the whole South African process, and which also led us to where we are today, that it would appear that Jacob Zuma might leave and Cyril Ramaphosa or Tokyo sexually will take over. At that time, we're not sure. We'll show you that video, and then we'll come back to the studio and hear what Jacob Zuma said. We will tell you then about what we'll be doing on Tuesday in terms of voting for political systems, online voting for political systems, which we'll introduce to you on Tuesday, but I'll tell you a bit about it. If you have time, then let's see this video that we put out, I think 2 years ago, here on Good Evening Ghana about South Africa. Tonight, we take our turn on discussing the matters in South Africa. Some have even said that we cannot call it xenophobia, and academics are beginning to pour a lot of ink about what has happened in South Africa. Well, the story for those of you who may be hearing it for the first time, even though I doubt there's anyone hearing it for the first time, is that native South Africans have attacked other Africans who live in South Africa, primarily those male working class in South Africa who are not South Africans have been attacked. The attack has been worse among southern South Africans from Zimbabwe and from Zambia and places like that. So, well, in Ghana, we are hearing now that no Ghanaian has been involved, even though some Ghanaian deaths have been reported. It's not so clear whether the deaths are connected to or they are not. Tonight, we have two people in the studio who understand South Africa, with whom we're having this conversation. But we put up this information just for you to see, because we observed a trend about South Africa and its politics. We observed that many of the epochal political changes that have occurred in South Africa have happened after some of these major violent incidences. And we can go all the way to 1960, where Sharpeville occurred. Now, the Sharpeville massacre was the first kind of brutality that was meted out to black people in South Africa. About 5,000 or so people gathered at the police station to protest. The police later claimed that they felt threatened by the people coming on them, and they opened fire and shot all of these people. By this time, the African National Congress had already begun working, but the African National Congress had not moved into full swing to create a militant armed wing of the African National Congress, and we'll come and explain that. So this is Sharpeville. So Sharpeville then occasioned a lot of violence in South Africa, and then the politics of South Africa now moved into a certain gear where the ANC began to launch an armed struggle against the apartheid government of the National Party. So Nelson Mandela led the ANC to form what they called Inkonto Wesizwe, which means the spear of the nation. Inkonto Wesizwe became the armed wing of the African National Congress. Inkonto Wesizwe were accused of several bomb throw-ins all over the place, and they had a base in a place in South Africa called Rivonia. Now, it was the activities of Inkonto Wesizwe that sent Nelson Mandela to the first major trial. In fact, Mandela had already been convicted, but was given a sentence in absentia. But But the incidents of Inkonto Wesizwe in Rivonia, which occasioned a lot of bomb throwing around South Africa, sent Mandela for a treason trial, Mandela and his colleagues for a treason trial, which is commonly known as the Rivonia trial. And it's this trial that took Nelson Mandela to prison on the conviction of a life sentence for treason. So the Sharpeville event then occasioned the ANC into a very major violent drive for independence or for political inclusion, whichever way you want to see it. And so Mandela then goes to prison. Let's see that photograph again. Mandela was in prison. This is Mandela having a chat with one of his colleagues in the early days when they went to prison in the late 1960s. So the Sharpeville got ANC into fourth gear, a bit of violence. Mandela goes into prison. Now, let's fast forward and go to the next major violent event that occurred in South Africa was the Soweto uprising. What was the Soweto uprising about? Now, after Mandela went to prison, sometime in the early 70s, a new group sort of emerged in South Africa. That included the name that you know very well, Steve Biko. Now, Steve Biko and the others became conscientized from the education they had. As Steve Biko in particular was a medical student. And so they began to discuss among themselves the kind of government that they wanted to exist in South Africa. They may have also been significantly influenced by the activities in Southern Africa, especially those led by Che Guevara and others that created a bit of instability in Angola and a bit of self-determination battles began going on in that region in Southern Africa at the time. Remember, by this time, most of West Africa and East Africa had been independent, and the African Organization and Union were running up north in Africa. But in Southern Africa, there was still dominance of imperialist governments, especially in South Africa. So Steve Biko and co began agitation about the way in which they wanted their government to run. And they drew a lot of inspiration from people like Nelson Mandela, who were already in prison, with whom they had no contact, but about whom they knew so much. So the Soweto uprising was a situation where Ubuntu, sort of educational policy, was set up by the National Party. And Ubuntu was such that black people will learn Afrikaans. And so, and black people will have a certain limited education that made them only good for menial jobs. That's what Ubuntu was about. And so this Soweto uprising was a protest against the Ubuntu. And there it was. About 20,000 people marched in the street in 1976. And there was a major incident across the world where many people died. You see some of the photographs, people being carried into cars, people just being killed, you know, by the South African Defense Forces. So this event then got worldwide attention. And so this very major violent event then changed the politics of South Africa again. What changed the occasion? It occasioned a change where there was a lot of light now thrown on Robben Island, the prison in which Mandela and his friends were being kept, and people, including the head of the Catholic Church, the Pope, the United Nations Security Council, the United States government, and the African Union. By this time, the Organization of African Unity had been formed, and they were beginning to gain a big voice in the matters about Africa. What did this occasion? It occasioned a situation where Nelson Mandela and his people were treated better and began the conversation for the release of Nelson Mandela. Now, that conversation, incidentally and unfortunately, took a bit long. It started from the 70s and ended in the early 90s with the release of Mandela. So the Soweto uprising, which was another very violent, epochal matter in the history of South Africa, occasioned the lights that was thrown on Robben Island and the questions about why Mandela was in prison, and eventually got Nelson Mandela freed out of prison. But when Nelson Mandela came out of prison, what was the state of affairs in South Africa? It was the Mandela's release was a response by the National Party to the concerns that were raised since the Soweto uprising about Mandela in prison. There was no particular discussion about political inclusion, about elections, about unbanning the ANC. Remember, the ANC, the African National Congress, remained a banned political organization throughout most of the period that Mandela was in prison, including after he had been released. So there was no real conversation. And Mandela and co were getting a bit agitated at the time after he came from prison, when there was no real political timetable. Now, how did the timetable occur? Another very major violent event occurred in South Africa, and it is about Chris Hani. We'll be seeing him in a little while. Now, this is Chris Hani, a young man that many people may not know. So I talked about Inkonto Wesizwe, isn't it? Now, Chris Hani, he resurrected Inkonto Wesizwe. You know, after Mandela and co went to prison and the organization appeared to have suffered a bit of credibility and people were afraid to associate with Inkonto, it was Chris Hani who lifted Inkonto Wesizwe up again. So throughout the 80s, Chris Hani was the big hero of all the young people in South Africa. And every South African young man grew wanting to be a member of Inkonto Wesizwe. In fact, they chose to be with Chris Hani rather than go to school. So Chris Hani became a dominant figure in the politics of South Africa, almost equivalent to Nelson Mandela before he he went to prison. Yes, of course, he also drew inspiration from Mandela, but this really was Mandela's, Mandela come again, sort of, for the South African people. Those who grew up after Mandela had gone to prison did not see him, they didn't know him, they heard a lot about him, but in Chris Hani, they felt that all the stories they heard about Nelson Mandela was exemplified by him. Chris Hani was a great leader of Inkonto Wesizwe. Now, what happened to Chris Hani? After Mandela had been released, one Saturday morning, Chris Hani was taking newspapers out of his home, and then he was killed by a young man, just shot. So you can imagine what happened. All of Soweto went black. All the black people decided that day that every white person must leave South Africa. The kind of violence that attended the murder of Chris Hani was phenomenal. It was beyond what the National Party could consider. So on that Saturday, there was a big meeting between the National Party and Nelson Mandela. And for the first time, the discussion came about when will there be politics of inclusion, when will there be elections, when will the ANC be unbanned so they can participate in the politics of South Africa. So that other violent event, which was Chris Hani's murder, then occasioned the new political move, which was elections in South Africa. So then Mandela became president after that, after the elections came in. Now, I didn't say one thing. On that day when Chris Hani was killed, Nelson Mandela was asked by the government of South Africa to broadcast to the nation and calm tempers down. Mind you, Mandela was not really in the politics of things. He didn't have any legal position. He didn't have any formal position. He was just the hero come from prison. But they said, it is only Mandela who can speak to the people of South Africa, calm them down. Mandela said, I need to talk to South African people and tell them something more important than just calm down. So he was allowed to discuss the question of political inclusion and the timetable for elections and all of that. That calmed down the black people. Eventually, they went to the polls. The ANC was unbanned, and there was no way the ANC was going to lose that election. But then Mandela became president of South Africa. So if we fast forward now to what occurred as another violent epoch in the history of South Africa, and you have just seen that documentary, which will play again for those of you who have not seen, with Julius Malema, the new kid on the block, sort of addressing the parliament and really attacking the president. So if we take this event to be another major violent epoch in the history of South Africa, the question then is, where will this event lead? What kind of political change will be occasioned by this event? And we begin to think wide and think that, will this political event affect the popularity of the African National Congress? Now, the ANC was one of those parties in Africa that you couldn't see them lose elections, like the Ba'ath Party in Libya and Turkey. Of course, the Ba'ath Party in Libya came down, and Turkey came down as well. But the ANC is that humongous juggernaut of a political party that you can't see lose election in South Africa. So we're asking the question, will this violence then occasion the deconstruction of the African National Congress in South Africa? That's the question we're asking. But let's come to the African National Congress. That Julius Malema is one of the fiercest voices in South Africa. Now, he was the national youth organizer of the African National Congress, and he was the man whose activities, by and large, brought Jacob Zuma to power. Of course, he and Jacob Zuma are falling out now, and you heard the kinds of things he said about him. So the Julius Malema factor is there. But there are other people. How can the ANC recreate itself outside Jacob Zuma? There are other people who can come in. Now, this is Cyril Ramaphosa. Cyril Ramaphosa is one of those trade unionist leaders who was one of the big fighting people in the 1980s. But Ramaphosa is now one of the richest men in South Africa. He's become a businessman. He was chairman of MTN, and he was one of the key people with Nelson Mandela, and there was thought about him that he could be president. But those who oppose to him say that he's corrupt. Well, he's quite very rich in South Africa, but we cannot say that he's corrupt. But his opponents think that he's corrupt, and therefore he has lost the feel and the touch with the ordinary people. And that's essential to lead the ANC and to recreate the ANC. Has the ANC got anyone who has the touch with the people to take the ANC to the next level, or will this event occasion a deconstruction of the ANC? That's a question we're asking. So that's Cyril. There's another person. Now, this is Tokyo Sexuale. He's one of those people who are also very, very wealthy, and he also came from the fighting. He was in prison with Mandela, but Tokyo has now become one of the wealthiest men in South Africa. So again, he and Cyril have been put in the same category. That's Tokyo and Cyril Ramaphosa put in the same category. They've lost touch with ordinary people. They cannot be leaders of the African National Congress. So, but Nelson Mandela used to have a conversation with people, and South Africans also are beginning to have a certain serious conversation about the leadership of the country and the leadership of the ANC. And it's a racial conversation. They are asking the question that if Barack Obama has been president in the United States of America, which has only, 12% black population, can it not be said that this man, Trevor Manuel, can be president of South Africa? Now, he's a very loyal member of the ANC. He's handled the finance ministry Since Nelson Mandela was president, through Thabo Mbeki and with Jacob Zuma, he's at trade. Now here, people are looking at him that if the African National Congress in South Africa really wants to recreate itself, perhaps they should be going for a white leader. Trevor Mono has served the party for a very long time, and he's the man people are talking about. So what's going to happen? We'll keep watching. We'll keep our taps on South Africa. But stay tuned. We are now going to have the discussion with our panel. And a lot of things are going to come out tonight about South Africa. I hope you enjoy the presentation on the touchscreen. We'll be right back.
But maybe pressure will make Joanna see how everybody could live as one. Oh, give me hope, Joanna, come on. Hope, Joanna, give me hope, Joanna, for the morning come. Give me hope, Joanna, hope before the morning come. I hear she makes all the golden money to buy new weapons and new shape of guns. While every mother in a black Soweto fears the killing of another son, sneaking across all the neighbors' borders. Now and again having little fun. She doesn't care if the fun and games she play is dangerous to everyone. Oh, give me hope, Joanna. Hope, Joanna, give me hope.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Why do you look serious? You can't even say good evening. Oh, what's happening? Huh? You are tired. Why? We are working, aren't we? A new decision has been made by the ANC, whose effect is that I have now been compelled to resign by way of a motion of no confidence set down for tomorrow, 15 February 2018. I am forever indebted to the ANC, the liberation movement. I've served almost all my life. I respect each member and leader of this glorious movement and am grateful to the ANC that in the face of its revolutionary mission to ensure a better life for all and the creation of a non-racial, non-sexist and democratic South Africa, it deployed me at the pinnacle of its role in government. I also thank the citizens of South Africa for the privilege of serving as the President of the Republic since 2009. It has been an honor that I will cherish as long as I live. I wish to thank members of Cabinet, deputy ministers, and the whole of government.
Hello, welcome back. Thank you very much. So that's the story on South Africa. Now let's tell you what we're preparing for Tuesday. A lot of people have been asking questions on social media, all over the place about the political system in South Africa that allows the president to be forced out of power. And that's the same political system that obtains in Britain, and it's the same political system in Australia, and I believe in Canada as well, and also in Malaysia and Singapore and Japan. That used to be the political system in Ghana as well. In fact, under the presidency of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah from 1951, under the prime ministerialship, I should say, because usually in that system they call it prime minister. The South Africans call it president anyway. From 1951 up to 1960, that's how Ghana was. In 1960, we became a republic and moved to the American presidential system, which we still operate today. And then in 1969, Ghana also went back to the parliamentary system. What I'm planning to do is to take a vote from you as to which is a better political system for the development of African countries. So on Tuesday, I'll be taking a live vote. I'll have two different people in the studio. I'm going to have a very senior journalist, 80 years old and of another generation. In fact, he has put up an article about urging Ghanaians to return to the British parliamentary system. And then I have my own biases about that, and I'll be explaining those biases on Tuesday. We're going to put a lot of footage together about how these different political systems are expressed in terms of their accountability, in terms of their major differences, like what has just happened in South Africa, where Jacob Zuma has 2 more years to be president, according to the mandate that was given to him. But yesterday, he had to step aside. It also happened to Prime Minister Tony Blair in Britain. He had about 1.5 years on the mandate that was given to him, but he had to step aside. It happened to Margaret Thatcher. She had some part of her mandate left unserved, but she was forced out in those days. But it doesn't happen in American presidential system. When American presidents are elected, they are elected for a 4-year term. When Ghanaian presidents are elected under the 4th Republican Constitution, they are elected for a 4-year term, and they cannot be forced out in any circumstance. You have to wait for the next election. Well, is that good or bad? We'll be taking a vote from all of you guys, and on Tuesday, as we explain the system in detail with a studio guest who will talk to us about that. Okay, so now we move to our second segment. Martin Benskaiser Alamisi Amidu, during his vetting, was asked a question about he being the biggest corruption catcher, was asked a question about how he's going to manage the process so that there's no media trial. And thankfully, and we are thankful to that because we had made the point earlier, he pointed to the Ghana Journalists Association as being responsible to guard journalists against this matter. Remember that a press statement from the Ghana Journalists Association sometime last year caused an uproar in which we had a very animated studio editorial about the matter. Tonight we are not as animated, but tonight we are not fighting. But of course, we keep no prisoners, as I said. So we want to bring back into perspective this matter. It's a very serious concern for us and for me personally as a journalist, in the way in which we manage publications of investigations when they are not done or when they have not been confirmed. This is what we said a few months ago, sometime last year. We'll show you that. We'll show you what Martin Amidu said, and then we will celebrate the fact that we are in good company with a special prosecutor. Forgive us for going back to this, but here it is. Tonight I'll be talking to you about the GJA press statement, about other matters, about what our research has shown, and then we can all share in the matter. Let's have a look at the statement. So the statement is this. People have not seen it. It follows. At the same time, now here's the caution. At the same time, the Ghana Journalists Association urges extreme caution. What is wrong with a person being cautioned? We'll come and talk about that. When you are doing media trial, and we have been in this country and people have gone to court against the very brand and have succeeded, and they are cautioning you that you have talent, you have conviction, but be cautious. And you don't, and what's wrong with the statement? Let's go on. At the same time, the JJA urges extreme caution and circumspection in order not to pronounce certain people guilty in the media, whereas any court of competent jurisdiction has not even tried them yet. Now, this statement speaks directly to the ethics of the profession. It speaks directly to it. And we have gone to India to find out what they think about the ethics. We'll show you. This statement here, civil society, this statement speaks directly to the ethics of the media profession, that we are cautioning you with circumspection in order not to pronounce certain people guilty, because that's really what is happening. And we have done that before. We have gone to court and we have had egg on our faces. We have been defeated in court in this country. Didn't civil society know that? Recently, we are all in arms, hand in hand, trooping to Kwesi Nyantakyi, the president of the Ghana Football Association. We are begging him for somebody. Are we not? Are we not begging him for somebody? Is he not? Don't they have a case in court? Are we not begging Kwesi Nyantakyi for somebody? And when the GJA puts this up, you say that it is a wrong statement, that it is intended to castigate and impede. I don't even know where they get that from. This statement is castigating and impeding. Please, let's go on. At the same time, the JJ urges extreme caution and circumspection in order not to pronounce certain people guilty in the media, whereas any court of competent jurisdiction has not even tried them. The stories must also be balanced. Balanced story speaks to the ethics of the profession. Why is anybody thinking this is pulled out from the moon? This is speaking to the ethics of the profession. The stories must be balanced, ensuring at all times that the perspectives of the parties at the center of such investigative reporting are frankly represented. We'll come to those details. It is important also that all facts are fully verified before they are thrown into the public domain. All facts fully verified before they are thrown into the public domain. All I'm saying is that the statement that Afilmoni issued, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. If you do a content analysis, and the statement that the civil society issued is fundamentally flawed. It is unrepresentative of what Afilmoni wrote because he didn't castigate and he didn't impede. And I'm surprised. We sat here and Eddie Annan went and sued and won the case. Everybody pretends they've forgotten. These guys go on radio and they call a businessman a thief. You are the fourth estate of the realm. You're not the first. You're not the second. You're not the third. So as we were trained, learn to use words like alleged. It appears. We don't know, but it looks like.
But, Mr. Chairman, let me read a quotation from one of his papers. I want to know whether it is attributable to him before I ask a question. It is a quote. The Constitution has clearly delineated the type of public officers who shall be appointed by the President with the approval of Parliament. Public officers in the category of special prosecutor do not fall under that category. It is unconstitutional for Parliament to partake in the approval, and it is the exclusive appointment powers of the President. Is it really something that you wrote and you stand by it now, that you think that Parliament should not vet you and that only the President should do that?
I wrote it in the 25-page critique. It is there, and if you remember, at the beginning, I answered the question myself by saying that I raised it with the President because Parliament was now requiring that the fellow should be of the same conditions as a Court of Appeal judge and be subjected to Parliament, approval by Parliament. And then the issue was, should we throw away the dirty water with the baby? And I said, it is, for me, with the President's own commitment, it was more important to fight the canker than to worry about principles of constitutionality, particularly when the President had called my attention to the fact that once Parliament had passed it, which I knew myself, until the Supreme Court declares it unconstitutional, that is the law. I agreed with him entirely. And I have said to this House that I didn't want anybody to think that it was because I may be afraid of vetting.
Sorry about that. We'll get you the right insert. Now, this is what Martin Amidu said about media trial. That's what we're looking for. And we were so fascinated about the entire vetting process, so we play something. This is what Martin Amidu said yesterday about media trial.
Supreme Court. Mr. Chairman, all I can say is that I don't subscribe to people being tried by the press, because every Ghanaian is entitled to presumption of innocence. And it is the responsibility of the prosecution to prove his guilt beyond every reasonable doubt. He has no obligation to prove his innocence. So, if you watch, when I was Deputy Attorney General, Minister of Interior, I scarcely gave press interviews about people's cases because it's not only unethical, it's unfair. And a reputation one destroyed is difficult to retrieve even when you are acquitted. I think that the question you have asked me, I hope the Ghana Journalists Association is taking note. They are a credible professional organization. I'm a lawyer. I'm telling you what we lawyers think about it. I cannot decide for the Association of Journalists. I think that that matter will have to be taken with them. because the integrity of everybody is important. My office, I can assure you, will try to protect the people we are investigating until we decide we are going to make a charge and charge the fellow. But you see, we are dealing with law 959, and if you look at it, Parliament decided that the reports should be submitted periodically. When I read it, what is the nature of the report? And when you submit a public report, what happens to the people being investigated? Will it be my office which will be leaking it? Or by complying with law, people who are being investigated are leaked? These are some of the issues we have to think about and see how best we can handle it. But I can assure you that I disagree with people being investigated before they are put to trial, being tried in the press. It is, I believe, unconstitutional.
Okay, so, well, this is not me speaking. I'm a simple news reporter, but this is a special prosecutor to be Martin Alamisi Benz Kaiser Amidu. That's a Kaiser talking, so I'm sure that this will put to rest that matter over whether the GJA press statement that was released in September last year amounted to corporate capture. Civil society, I hope you're listening, and I hope you've heard the special prosecutor. And I hope you also heard the special prosecutor laying the matter at the doorstep of the Ghana Journalists Association. Congratulations, Mr. Afilmoni. You were doing the right thing. And civil society, please, listen. Anti-graft campaigners, listen. This is the Kaiser speaking. This is not us speaking. When GJA issues a statement cautioning journalists to be careful about investigative journalism and about publishing stuff about people who have not been pronounced guilty by a court, it is not corporate capture. It is doing their work ethically. That's what the Kaiser is saying. We all heard that in Parliament yesterday. We all heard that in Parliament yesterday, didn't we? Okay, I was going to play Zangalewa, but I won't because I don't want to ruffle feathers. I'll play something else, something softer, nicer, more decent, more beautiful. It's by a great friend of ours who has passed. Dr. Miles Morrow died in an unfortunate plane crash. Before then, we are delighted that of all the hundreds of interviews that he gave, he was here on Good Evening Ghana when he came to Ghana and gave us a solid 1-hour interview that we thoroughly enjoyed. It's still on our YouTube page and you can see it, and we're happy that many people have seen it. So the Zangalewa dancers, we will give them a holiday today, even though it would have been very appropriate now that the matter of September has been settled. Now, we were castigated all over the place. Social media took us to dry cleaners and washed us. Few people supported us, and as the matter went on, many people supported us. But yesterday, on Tuesday, when I was listening to the vetting, I was delighted, I have to say, and I cannot hide my excitement about Benz Kaiser putting this matter in correct, absolutely proper legal, social, and political context, that you don't sit on radio and call people guilty of anything. It is unethical. Those are the words that he used. And he said, who checks it? The Ghana Journalists Association must check it. When Ghana Journalists Association was checking it in September, they said it was corporate capture. Some of us were crucified for even attempting to share the statement. Anyway, Miles Morrow has some advice for us. So we are looking for a brand new life in the special prosecutor. The South Africans are also looking for a brand new life with their new president. Miles Morrow has an answer on to how we get a brand new life. Here is Dr. Miles Morrow playing on his piano. You will love this. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
Something inside us always yearning for a brand new world. People everywhere are so confused. Leaders don't know just what to do. Everybody wants a brand new world. And though we send rockets to the moon and the stars, and though we make trains and ships that go very far, and there's not a mountain that man has not climbed, yet a brand new world he could never find. 'Cause if we want a brand new world, you got to have brand new people, And if we want brand new people, you've got to have a brand new life. And if we want a brand new life, you've got to have a brand new spirit. And if we want a brand new spirit, you've got to come to Jesus Christ. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. The way the world is turning, something inside us always yearning, yearning for a brand new world. People everywhere are so confused. Leaders don't know just what to do. Everybody wants a brand new world. And though we send rockets to the moon and the stars, and though we make trains and ships that go very far, and there's not a mountain that man has not climbed, yet a brand new world he could never find. 'Cause if we want a brand new world, you've got to have brand new people. And if we want brand new people, you've got to have a brand new life. And if we want a brand new life, you've got to have a brand new spirit. And if we want a brand new spirit, you've got to come to Jesus Christ. Oh yeah.
15 minutes to the top of the hour, 10 o'clock, so I'm sure that you've enjoyed this monologue of a Good Evening Ghana tonight. And I was told that people are happy that Ben Kaiser has spoken. Okay, so there were two other questions that we selected from the vetting that are quite important in terms of the clarification that was given by the Kaiser. It's a question from Neil Vanderpoy, who is the Member of Parliament for the Ododo constituency, and also a question from Titus Glover. We are hoping to read out some text messages from you tonight before we look at these. But just to reiterate that on Tuesday, you shouldn't miss the program. We'll start popularizing it, or how do we say it? Promoting it at the weekend, because we want you to do a vote about which political system, as young people, old people, middle-aged people, which political system is better. Is it a South African type of political system that presidents can be forced out, which is the British system, Australian system, Canadian system, Japanese system, or is it the system that we must have a firm 4 years or 8 years of a president without any interruption or without any interference? Cameron Dodo has an article about that. We'll get him in the studio. Cameron Dodo is 80 years old, and he's still writing. Okay, so a text message comes from Sir Obama. He's in Pokwasi. He says that let's be magnanimous in the celebration of Martin Amidu's appointment, because in the unlikely event that their lordships uphold Dominic Aini's claim, all this frenzied jubilation will be short-lived. Okay, thank you very much. And Chiado says corruption is a time bomb, so African leaders should learn from it. And Godson Ajavo says that corruption in Africa is now being fought fiercely by the citizenry. Africa on the rise. God bless. Okay, that's a good one. All right, so we go now to see Neil Vanderpoy's question. Now, he asked a very tricky question on Tiger Eye, the institution that Anas Arimea Anas, the famous investigative journalist, has been applying. You remember that at some point, I think Martin Amidu wanted to take legal action against Tiger Eye one way or the other, and a question was put to him directly, and he answered it. We'll take what he said in that question, and then we'll also listen to another question by Titus Glover, and then we'll be bringing this edition of Good Evening Ghana to a close. Now, Simon says, what's happening in South Africa and Zimbabwe? And sorry, I didn't say anything about Zimbabwe. May he rest in peace, Morgan Tsvangirai. Morgan Tsvangirai has been one of the fiercest opponents of Robert Mugabe. In fact, he stood up to Robert Mugabe in the days when it was impossible to do so. It cost him a lot of injury. It cost him a lot of reputation. He went to prison back and forth. Morgan Tsvangirai passed at the age of 65 in Zimbabwe yesterday. Also, a very important political development in the Southern Africa region of Africa. May he rest in perfect peace, Morgan Tsvangirai. Simon says, what's happening in South Africa and Zimbabwe indicates that the African people are not satisfied with the way our leaders are treating us. Obviously, he says that is a good sign. We saw the Arab Spring occur some time back, didn't we, when political deliveries collapsed in Northern Africa, and the Arab Spring, of course, left in its wake major difficulties with Libya, which is still almost like a failed state. It also left in its wake a controversial situation in Egypt, where the Islamic fundamentalists won the election and it was denied them, and there's still a lot of chaos in Egypt. And it left Tunisia, which is now recovering, and the only stable country in that region is Morocco, which incidentally wants to join ECOWAS, but that's a matter for another day. So let's go back to the vetting committee room. As a big story for this week, here is Neelante van der Poy asking Martin Amido questions.
On Tiger Eye, that's a Nansari Miyao analysis group. You even impugn on the integrity of the organization. You call them lies, fraudulent, and all this. If you have to work with these organizations and you have such a level of distrust with them, how are you going to cooperate in ensuring that you enhance the office you're going to hold?
Look, Mr. Chairman, Parliament is elected by we the people to represent us. And we are at liberty to critique it. If we as citizens cannot critique it because one day we will appear for them, it means that we are being gagged. I expressed my opinion about Parliament. I didn't hide it. I expressed it robustly and openly. So that doesn't mean I don't respect Parliament. I do respect Parliament. But as a citizen, I have a right to make comments, which I did very candidly. And I was advising the incoming Parliament not to do what the abrogated Parliament did. You know, and I don't see anything really wrong with it. It's a constitutional defense mechanism to tell Parliament, don't do what they did. Chart a new path. Be a different... It may be well that there are old members of the old Parliament in this one, but that doesn't make this yesterday's Parliament. And I was admonishing this Parliament. That doesn't mean I cannot work with Parliament, but that also doesn't mean that when a member of Parliament is involved in a corruption offense, I will let him go. I mean, I have to be fair. You know? So I cannot be docile. My appointment gags me because I can't criticize you again. It gags me. That's why since I was nominated, nobody has heard a word from me. Right? But if in the discharge of the duties, a member falls foul of the law, my duty, if properly investigated, and there is a case, to deal with the matter. Other countries, Netanyahu is under investigation. Trump is under investigation. Temer in Brazil is under investigation. I haven't said that, don't put words into my mouth. All I'm trying to say is that the law is no respecter of persons. Consequently, the very fact that I have criticized Parliament as a body doesn't mean that because you are calling my attention to that criticism, I'll be intimidated not to deal with a member of Parliament if he's involved in a corruption offense. I'm trying to disabuse of it. I'll deal with it squarely.
Mr. Chairman, I mentioned, Mr. Chairman, I mentioned two institutions. Mr. Chairman, my senior cadre has not dealt with the second aspect. I mentioned Parliament, I mentioned Tiger Eye. And I said a lot of things that you used against.
Mr. Chairman, when you ask me so many questions, it's difficult to keep all of them. Tiger Eye, that was a matter, a constitutional matter I raised against Tiger Eye, a registered company under the Companies Code. And the reason why I didn't pursue the matter further was because some people had gone to the Supreme Court with the matter. It doesn't mean I don't believe in what I wrote. You see, but as I said, Tiger Eye is not on trial. I won't make a comment about Tiger Isle when they would have the chance to answer. But I'm saying the reason why I didn't move further on that company, and indeed, it is not known as Tiger Eye in the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Interior. They changed their name. I've forgotten the name. I didn't know this matter will be raised. But they changed their name. You know, but it is not fair for me to come and make statements about them here when they have no right of reply. And I believe that if Tiger Eye thinks that I said anything that defamed them, they know the right forum. And I will meet them there. I will adduce my evidence. And at the end of the day, I spoke about people holding service passports. It was admitted.
The mentioning of the name Martin Amidu sometimes sends shivers down the spine of people. Are you that fearful?
Mr. Chairman, the problem is with perception and the circle of friends you have. In the Attorney General's department, when I come down from my car at 6:30 in the morning, I walk up straight to my office and I get engrossed in my work. And then when I'm coming down, maybe going to the castle, I just ran downstairs. So there were some attorneys who said their deputy doesn't smile. Well, that was the perception. When the young woman walks into my office, she's scared to come to my office. She's told that, no, when you meet him personally, you will be surprised. So she walks into my office. Her retina is almost detaching. I hope she will hear it. And then she has to be in America in a week. Otherwise, she will go blind. So she walks to my office and then she tells me, I said, what? You're working for the Republic of Ghana. Something can be done about it. So I took my phone and called Lisbeth. Can you tell the old man I want to see him? Lisbeth talks to the old man. I go to see him. I say, sir, this lawyer is doing some work. 1 week, I will be blind. He said, I'm talking about President Rollins. Chief, leave it with me. Chief, leave it with me. The girl went to the US, got her retina corrected. She came and she rendered service to Mother Ghana. And she went around telling people, no, if you don't go to him, you don't know that he's such a nice man. What I'm trying to say is that when people don't know you well, they have perceptions about you. But I have defended the voiceless I have not known. I have defended people who thought I was their enemies. But when they got into trouble, I even found them lawyers. So I am not the person people think I am. I may not be having a smiling face. I may not be having a handsome face. But at least I have a heart that loves people. That is why I fight for the ordinary man. I don't like political elites who cheat the nation. I don't.
Mr. Chairman, the President said that just by announcing my friend's name, he has put the fear of God in those who want to commit crime. Is it true?
Mr. Chairman, the presence of Jerry John Rawlings on the scene was enough to warn people to reduce crime. So if my appointment has the same effect, I would know whether it's true or not. But if my track record makes people to be afraid of it, well, that would be good. But I cannot answer whether my presence will put fear in people. I'll do my work, as you know me, in accordance with the book, since we've been doing since 1983. I'll do it that way. If it puts fear in people and they stop, well, that's okay. But I can't say whether it's true that it puts fear on people. I'll be presumptuous to say that.
One worry I have about this appointment is the fact that the nominee has written profusely and sometimes said things or written about things that anybody seeing or reading will have some misgivings. Now, the issue I want to put to him is, how many people do you think, after reading this, will confidently say that you are going to be fair and objective? When you name people, when you castigate people for things that you see they were doing wrong.
Mr. Chairman, I write and admonish people because I think what they are doing is unconstitutional. And I write for the enlightened public because there are many people who even don't understand what I write. And they read them out of context. You know, so I write for the enlightened public who can appreciate what I am writing. And I think the preponderance of majority of them will know that this is a man exercising his right as a citizen. Exercising your right as a citizen is different from taking prosecutorial decisions. As I said, if I were on the bench, even though I've held political appointment, that's not going to affect my judgment. I'm going to act in accordance with the spirit of judgeship. So for me, the enlightened public, which does not come to read, you see, the way you interpret any article depends on the bank of knowledge you bring to it. So you can read into it what is not there. You see, and that's what happens with most of my articles. People come with a different mind and read things into it and attribute it to me. And I have always not complained because you will see the headline. When you read my article, it is not that one. But my duty is to write it.
You had a number of reservations about the act. And one of the things that you were worried about was the question of being vetted, because we don't vet Court of Appeal judges. Now, this also appears to be a lower position than you have occupied before. That is Attorney General. Now, instead of an Attorney General writing, it's now a law that she has delegated her powers to you. Why do you accept a lower position when you have reached that height?
Chairman, I've said that I was nominated to the Supreme Court in 1999. I turned it down. The position of special public prosecutor, the position of special public prosecutor deals with a passion which I have fought throughout my life, to your very knowledge. And I'm not coming to it because of the money, because that's what you are saying. It's not the money. Otherwise, I would have gone to the Supreme Court. In 1999, yeah, maybe I could have retired on my salary. I'm coming because there's a job to do for Ghana so that opportunities will not throw it away like has been done in the past. And the president wants it to be done. And he thinks that in spite of the differences, my articles, some of them criticizing him, he thinks that having assessed me from the bar, I am a credible person who would do it fairly, transparently, and without discrimination, right? He puts it to me. I wasn't originally intending to do it. But then I asked myself, if this has been your passion, for which you and I joined the 31st December revolution, how could I refuse it?